It's interesting because I Trek has been with me for as long as I can remember. Like literally, one of my earliest memories is sitting on the couch with my dad, and I remember there was sweeping fanfare playing, and the saucer was separating from the secondary hull. And I realized years later I was watching the live premiere of Next Generation way back in
Wow.
1987. So it's funny because like working on Star Trek, it really, I've said this elsewhere, it's really been more than any other project I've written on, more like breathing than actually writing, because it's been so infused in my storytelling DNA. So I think that's all that is to say. It's really difficult for me to pick a favorite, because I think they all have something really special to contribute. But in terms of ones that are just purely nostalgic for me,
Mm.
it was Next Generation was my gateway, and then Deep Space Nine in particular was it's like the hub that made me first realize how storytelling and world building could really exist on television, because it was the sort of the center spoke to which all the other, like Terranor itself, all the other ships and
Yes,
shows
good
could dock
knowledge.
to. You had even the first episode of Deep Space Nine. Obviously, you had a crossover with Next Generation, and then the first episode of Voyager, they launched from Deep Space Nine, and all those little bits that slowly kind of connected together and started to tell like a grander tapestry of a story. Even Q showing up maybe once and getting his lights knocked out. you know, it,
Yes.
it and it's funny because I watched it in syndication. I most of my Trek viewing was, which I guess a lot of people watch Star Trek in the '90s this way. My local Fox affiliate had all the reruns, and they would air TNG and then Deep Space Nine back to back in order, in broadcast order. So basically,
Oh.
I think I was a few seasons behind and just catching up with season 7 for Deep Space Nine. So I got to binge watch the entire Deep Space Nine saga, top to bottom, and I only had to wait like a day
Ooh.
to see what happened next. And that
Yeah.
was my first exposure to it back in the '90s. So it's funny because, like, I heard whispers of people saying, like, oh, like it's so serialized. If I miss one week, which is ironic to complain about now in the era of heavy serialization and peak TV. But I missed all of that because I just watched it and I was like, this is one of the greatest television series ever made. What are you talking about? And thankfully, history agrees with me, it seems. So Deep Space Nine is definitely probably my favorite, and TNG I think is a close second. But all of them I think are fantastic for different reasons.
You mentioned you watched it with your dad. Did you watch, like, you went to Indiana University? Is that right? I think I remember.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
My
Hey,
dad was also,
Hoosiers.
yes.
Did you have any like college associated Trek memories, like get together with a group of people at the dorm or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of that, the memories I had, specifically Trek related, like Lee Sheldon, who was a writer for Next Generation, was a professor at IU at the time I was going there.
Oh,
And
wow.
obviously, Jerry Ryan, sorry, not Jerry Ryan, Jerry Taylor, who co-created Voyager. She was an alumni of IU, which is why Bloomington, Indiana, which is where my family is from, is also where Janeway is from.
Wow.
But she dedicated all of her Voyager production scripts to Indiana University. So I actually got to sit and read Jerry Taylor's scripts for Voyager with her notes on them, and it was part of my journey of learning how to be a screenwriter. So obviously, when they wanted to put a Janeway statue in Bloomington, Indiana, as the future birthplace of Janeway, I was the first to donate to that particular Kickstarter.
Wow.
You're telling me that if I break into IU's archives, I can find those scripts? Because that is tempting, and my brother went there, so I have access.
Yeah, I mean, you do not even have to break in. I believe they're at the Eli Lilly Library, which is specifically a library for rare manuscripts. They have all kinds of cool stuff. I think they have an Oscar. They have the original draft of On the Road from Jack Kerouac. They have all of Jerry Taylor's scripts. They have a Gutenberg Bible. They have a Shakespeare First Folio, and you can check out all of them You can read Shakespeare with a book that was printed in the 1600s and read as Shakespeare might have been holding that very book. It was a very magical place for a nerd who loves libraries.
Wow.
I was gonna say, did it help you in your career?
I mean, in a very roundabout way, I think so. Because obviously Jerry Taylor, being able to read how she wrote those episodes of, one of my favorite franchises and stuff, and just having a reverence for the written word, I think never hurts. So it was kind of a magical experience in a way.
I'm assuming it was your father that got you basically started in Star Trek. How does he feel now about your connection to it now?
Oh, he's over the moon. He specifically wants spoilers, and then he also is like, "Don't tell me." I just want to watch it as it but he was a big TOS guy, and a TNG guy. Those were kind of his two, because he watched it like a lot of people of his generation, in college dorms. I think he watched it TOS when it broadcast live, but then they would air reruns on PBS, which is weirdly how I watched TOS too. I remember many summers at my aunt's house, and she didn't have cable, but she had PBS, and I got to watch all these like crazy original series stories where like Kirk got to fight Abraham Lincoln and stuff, and very exciting and very entertaining for a grade schooler who I felt like I was getting away with something, because they thought it was just PBS. It was educational. Didn't realize I was just watching a bunch of crazy science fiction stories where they fought gangsters on a gangster planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of gangster,
so much nerd card flex right there.
Yeah, indeed.
So Aaron, I wanted to know, everybody kind of has different favorite themes and ideas from, throughout the 55-year history of Star Trek.
Sure.
But in Prodigy itself, what themes that are inherent in previous Star Trek series would you love to, and what do you hope shines through in Prodigy now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think the biggest one is something that there's a few actually, and I'll just try to elucidate off the top of my head. I mean, one of them is there's a sort of a preconception that sometimes people have about Star Trek, is that it's about a perfect future, which it's not. It's about a better future. But even those people are striving for an ideal that is always on the horizon. It's always across that next star, or in that new civilization that you might meet, and expanding your own horizons by interacting with people who are vastly different than yourself, and perhaps vice versa. And so I think in Star Trek Prodigy in particular, that was something we kind of wanted to explore from the get-go. Is like so many of the more traditional Star Trek series start in the heart of the Federation, or at least in a setting where you see people wearing the uniforms, and with the exception of maybe Deep Space Nine, where you're like on the fringe of the Federation, but it's still the Federation as they're on the wild frontier of it, right? But we wanted to. In every one of the series, there's always like they meet someone who's never heard of the Federation. So instead of venturing out and exploring those strange new worlds and strange civilizations and meeting them as the series goes on, we wanted to start with one of those civilizations and kind of immerse it, and have them come forth and slowly discover the world of Star Trek that we all hold so dear to ourselves. So I think that appealed to me for a number of reasons, besides just the obvious one, which is that it's like, oh, we can finally have an entry point for young and new audiences to slowly discover a lot of these amazing, sort of futurist kind of ideals and fun tech and concepts, so like the Prime Directive and this and that. One by one, and because we tend to take those for granted, and that's why whenever someone says like, where should I start watching Star Trek, and I'm like, I don't know, binge 50 episodes. Like there's a list of all the best ones from the last 5 decades. And eventually you kind of by osmosis start to kind of figure it out. But it's a little bit of a daunting task, especially in this day and age where there's so much television out there, and there's so many young people that, you know, grew up on Cocomelon or whatever, that they have so much kind of information being dumped on them. It's easier, I think, to just give them a place to start. And that's what I was like, gosh, if I had to explain what I love about Star Trek from both the high-minded ideals and just the sort of the crazy eye-popping wonder and you know, world-building concepts, how would I do it? And that's kind of what our room sat down to do. And we realized, like, oh, the idea of the Federation being this place that you can go to, that it's not a perfect place, but it's a place of people striving to be better, and finding people that maybe are outside of that. And you know, like we always caught little tastes of it with the Ferengi or you know, Cardassia or what have you, where they were vastly different, but it was always a sense of coming together. And we like the idea of someone of it being this sort of North Star that they could fake it till they make it and slowly embody these ideals that they learn about as they go, and by the end of it realize that that's the place where they could belong and truly discover themselves. And I think that sense of self-discovery is another theme that is, I think, present in all of Star Trek, whether it's Data discovering his motion ship or Odo figuring out what it means to be human. You know, there was always this sort of idea that our better self might be lurking somewhere inside of us, but it also might be out there somewhere, and you uncover it by venturing out into the unknown and being thrown into scary situations and realizing what you're made of. So, you know, I think that finding those themes of togetherness and self-discovery, I think, are very much at the forefront of Prodigy.
Wow.